The screech of tires against asphalt shattered the quiet autumn afternoon as Yates Zimmerman lunged into the busy intersection, his heart hammering against his ribs. The small terrier had darted into traffic without warning, and without thinking, Yates had dropped his groceries and followed. In one fluid motion, he scooped the dog into his arms, pivoting on his heel to avoid an oncoming sedan that missed him by inches. The dog trembled against his chest, both of them breathing heavily as horns blared and drivers shouted obscenities. "Oh my God, Pickles." A woman's voice cut through the chaos as Yates made his way back to the sidewalk, adrenaline still coursing through his veins. He looked up to see a woman running toward him, her caramel-colored hair catching the late afternoon sunlight. Her eyes, wide with concern, locked with his as she reached for the small dog. "Is he yours?" Yates asked, reluctantly handing over the wriggling terrier. The dog immediately covered her face with frantic licks. "Yes, thank you so much. He slipped his leash when I wasn't looking." She clutched the dog to her chest, finally getting a good look at her rescuer. "You could have been killed." Yates shrugged, suddenly aware of his shabby jeans and worn flannel shirt. "Better me than this little guy," he said, giving the dog a gentle scratch behind the ears. "Besides, my daughter would never forgive me if I just stood by." "I'm Charlotte," she said, extending her free hand. "Charlotte Layton, and this escape artist is Pickles." "Yates Zimmerman," he replied, taking her hand. Her grip was surprisingly firm, her skin soft against his calloused palm. "Nice to meet you both, though the circumstances could have been better." Charlotte smiled, and Yates felt something stir within him, something he hadn't felt in a long time. Then he remembered the groceries he'd dropped and turned to see them scattered across the sidewalk, a carton of eggs broken open, milk spilling onto the concrete. "Oh no," Charlotte said, following his gaze. "Your groceries. Please, let me replace them." "It's the least I can do after what you did for Pickles." Yates waved her off, embarrassment heating his cheeks. "Don't worry about it, it's just a few things." The truth was, those groceries had taken the last of his paycheck, and he'd been counting on them to get him and his daughter, Lily, through until payday. "I insist," Charlotte said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "Actually, let me buy you dinner instead. You mentioned a daughter." "Lily, she's 7. Yates hesitated. "That's very kind, but Dad—" The familiar voice made him turn. Lily was racing down the sidewalk from the direction of Mrs. Patel's apartment. His neighbor had agreed to watch Lily after school while Yates picked up a few essentials. "Lily Bug, what are you doing here?" he asked as his daughter crashed into his legs, her backpack bouncing against her small frame. "Mrs. Patel needed to go to the pharmacy, so she walked me to find you," Lily explained, her curious gaze shifting to Charlotte and Pickles. Her eyes widened. "A puppy, this is Pickles," Charlotte said, kneeling down to Lily's level. "And I'm Charlotte. Your dad just saved Pickles from getting hurt in the street." Lily beamed up at Yates. "Dad's a hero. He says heroes don't need capes, just good hearts." Charlotte's expression softened as she looked between father and daughter. "Your dad is absolutely right." She straightened up. "So, dinner, I know a place not far from here that has great food and a play area for kids." Yates was about to decline again when Lily tugged at his sleeve. "Can we go, Dad? Please? I'm starving and Pickles looks nice." He looked down at his daughter's hopeful face and then at Charlotte's genuine smile. Something about her eyes, warm, kind, without a hint of pity, made him nod. "Okay, but this isn't necessary, really." "It's completely necessary," Charlotte countered, falling into step beside them as they started walking. "Besides, Pickles and I could use the company." As they walked, Yates couldn't help but notice Charlotte's clothes, simple but clearly expensive, and the way she carried herself with an easy confidence. She was beautiful, but there was something else about her, something grounded and real despite her obvious polish. She chatted with Lily as if they were old friends, asking about school and favorite subjects. The restaurant Charlotte chose was casual enough that Yates didn't feel completely out of place, but nice enough that he wouldn't have chosen it himself. She insisted on ordering appetizers to share, and Lily's eyes went wide at the feast that arrived at their table. "So, Yates," Charlotte said after they'd ordered their main courses, "what do you do?" "I'm a carpenter," he replied, taking a sip of his water. "I work for a construction company during the day, and I do custom furniture pieces when I can get the commissions." "Dad makes the prettiest tables," Lily interjected, "and bookshelves. He made all the furniture in our apartment." Charlotte looked genuinely interested. "Really? I'd love to see your work sometime." "What about you?" Yates asked, trying to steer the conversation away from himself. "What do you do?" A flicker of something hesitation perhaps crossed Charlotte's face. "I'm in business development," she said vaguely. "Consulting, mostly." Before Yates could ask more questions, their food arrived, and Lily's excited gasp at her burger complete, with a smiley face made of condiments, shifted the conversation to lighter topics. As they ate, Yates found himself relaxing in Charlotte's company. She had a way of making him feel at ease, never drawing attention to the fact that he'd had to check the prices on the menu before ordering or that his clothes had seen better days. She treated him with a respect that had nothing to do with his financial situation. By the time they finished their meal, and Lily had exhausted herself in the play area, it was dark outside. Charlotte insisted on calling them a rideshare service, brushing aside Yates's protests that they could take the bus. "It was wonderful meeting you both," Charlotte said as they stood outside the restaurant, waiting for their ride. She knelt down to Lily's level again. "Especially you, Miss Lily. Thank you for sharing your dad with Pickles today," Lily giggled. "Can we see Pickles again sometime?" Charlotte glanced up at Yates, a question in her eyes. "I'd like that very much, if your dad doesn't mind." Yates felt a flutter of something in his chest, hope, maybe, or the beginnings of something he hadn't allowed himself to feel since Lily's mother had walked out on them 4 years ago. "I don't mind," he said softly. Charlotte pulled out her phone. "Let's exchange numbers, then, for Pickles' playdates, of course." As Yates entered his number into her sleek phone, much newer and more expensive than his own battered device, he couldn't help but wonder what someone like Charlotte saw in spending time with someone like him. But the warmth in her eyes as she said goodbye made him push those thoughts aside, at least for now. The ride home was filled with Lily's excited chatter about Charlotte, Pickles, and the restaurant's amazing desserts. Yates listened, smiling, but his mind kept returning to the woman with the caramel hair and kind eyes, who had turned what could have been a disastrous day into something unexpectedly wonderful. 3 days later, Yates's phone buzzed with a message from Charlotte, asking if he and Lily would like to join her and Pickles for a walk in the park that weekend. He hesitated only briefly before replying yes. Saturday morning found them at Washington Park, Lily racing ahead to the playground while Yates and Charlotte followed at a more leisurely pace, Pickles trotting happily between them on his leash. "She has so much energy," Charlotte observed, watching Lily climb the jungle gym. "She reminds me of myself at that age." "Were you a climber too?" Yates asked. Charlotte laughed. "The absolute worst. My parents were constantly getting calls from neighbors who'd found me in their trees. I was convinced I could build the perfect treehouse if I just studied enough of them." "And did you? Eventually. My grandfather helped me when I was 10. It was the best summer of my childhood." A shadow passed over her face momentarily. "He taught me a lot about working with my hands. I think he would have liked you." Yates felt a warmth spreading through him at the compliment. "He sounds like a good man." "The best," Charlotte agreed. "He grew up with nothing and built a good life through sheer determination. He never forgot what it was like to struggle, though. That's what made him special." They reached a bench near the playground and sat down, close enough to watch Lily but with a bit of privacy. Pickles settled at their feet, content to people watch. "Can I ask you something personal?" Charlotte said after a moment. Yates tensed slightly but nodded. "Lily mentioned her mom is gone. I don't want to overstep, but—" "She left when Lily was 3, Yates said quietly, watching his daughter swing from monkey bars, her face alight with joy. "Said she wasn't cut out for motherhood or marriage. Last I heard, she was in California." I'm sorry, Charlotte said, her hand briefly touching his arm. That must have been hard for both of you. Yates shrugged. It was worse for Lily. She doesn't really remember Rebecca, but she feels the absence. Kids at school talk about their moms, and she doesn't have those stories to share. She has you, though, Charlotte pointed out, and from what I can see, you're doing an amazing job. She's happy, confident, kind. Those are signs of a child who feels secure and loved. The compliment caught him off guard. Thanks, he managed. I try. Some days are harder than others. That's parenthood, I imagine, Charlotte said, then hesitated. I wouldn't know firsthand, but I've always wanted children. No kids of your own? Yates asked, surprised. Charlotte seemed like a natural with Lily. She shook her head. Never found the right person to have them with. And my career has been demanding. Before Yates could ask more about her mysterious career, Lily came running over, cheeks flushed with excitement. Dad, Charlotte, can we get ice cream? There's a truck over there. She pointed to where a line of children and parents had formed near a colorful ice cream truck. Sure, Lily Bug, Yates said, reaching for his wallet. He knew he had enough for one cone and he'd go without, but Charlotte was already standing. My treat, she said with a smile that brooked no argument. As a thank you for agreeing to spend the day with me and Pickles. As they walked toward the ice cream truck, Lily slipped her small hand into Charlotte's, chattering about her favorite flavors. The sight made Yates's heart constrict with a mixture of emotions he couldn't quite name. Part of him wanted to pull Lily back, to protect her from growing attached to someone who might not stick around. But another part, a part that had been dormant for too long, wanted to believe that Charlotte's presence in their lives could be more than temporary. Over the next few weeks, Charlotte became a regular fixture in their lives. She joined them for movie nights in their small apartment, brought books she thought Lily might enjoy, and once, memorably, showed up with an old-fashioned picnic basket packed with homemade sandwiches and fruit for a spontaneous indoor picnic when rain canceled their park plans. What struck Yates most was how Charlotte never seemed to notice, or at least never commented on their modest living situation. Their apartment was clean and comfortable but small, with furniture that Yates had indeed made himself, partly out of pride but mostly out of necessity. Charlotte treated their home with the same respect she might afford a mansion, admiring Yates's craftsmanship with genuine appreciation and never making him feel less than. One evening, after Lily had gone to bed, they sat on Yates's worn couch, talking softly over glasses of inexpensive wine that Charlotte had brought. I've been meaning to ask you something, Charlotte said, twirling the stem of her glass between her fingers. You mentioned you do custom furniture pieces when you can get commissions. Yates nodded. When I can, yeah. It's not as steady as my day job, but it pays better per hour. Would you consider making something for me? Charlotte asked. I've been looking for a new coffee table, and I'd much rather have something handmade than another mass-produced piece. Yates felt a flutter of pride. I'd be honored. What did you have in mind? Something simple but elegant. I trust your design sense completely. She paused. Would you want to see my place? To get a feel for the space and what might work? The invitation hung between them, weighted with possibility. Yates had been to Charlotte's neighborhood and upscale area across town, but never to her actual home. Part of him had been avoiding it, afraid that seeing how she lived would only emphasize the gulf between them. I'd like that, he said finally. Maybe next weekend. I could bring my portfolio too, show you some of my previous work. Charlotte's smile lit up her face. Perfect. Saturday afternoon. Lily is welcome too, of course. The following Saturday, Yates and Lily stood outside a beautiful brownstone in one of the city's most exclusive neighborhoods. Lily clutched a small bouquet of daisies she had insisted on bringing for Charlotte, while Yates tried to quell the nervousness in his stomach. Ready, Dad? Lily asked, looking up at him with excitement. She had dressed in her favorite outfit for the occasion, a purple dress with leggings, and had allowed Yates to braid her hair the way Charlotte had shown him. Ready, he affirmed, pressing the doorbell. Charlotte opened the door moments later, Pickles dancing around her feet. She was dressed casually in jeans and a soft sweater, her hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. "Welcome." She greeted them warmly, bending down to accept Lily's bouquet with genuine delight. "These are beautiful, Lily. Thank you." As they stepped inside, Yates tried not to gawk at the spacious interior. The entryway opened into a living area filled with natural light from tall windows. The decor was tasteful but not ostentatious, comfortable furniture in neutral tones, accented with colorful throw pillows and artwork. It was clearly the home of someone with means, but it didn't feel showy. "Your house is so big," Lily exclaimed, turning in a circle to take it all in. Charlotte laughed. "It is pretty big for just me and Pickles. That's why I love having visitors." She led them further inside. "Would you like a tour?" The tour revealed more of the same beautiful spaces that somehow managed to feel homey despite their elegance. There was a chef's kitchen where Charlotte admitted she rarely cooked anything complicated. A dining room, she said, was mostly for holidays, and a home office with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. "And this," Charlotte said, opening a door on the second floor, "is my favorite room." Yates stepped into what could only be described as a workshop. There were tools arranged neatly on pegboards, a workbench along one wall, and various projects in different stages of completion. "You make things?" he asked, surprised. Charlotte nodded, a hint of shyness in her expression. "Nothing as beautiful as your furniture. Mostly small woodworking projects, some metal work. My grandfather taught me the basics, and I've been teaching myself more over the years. It's my therapy, I guess." Yates moved through the room, examining her tools, many of which were higher quality than his own, and the projects she'd been working on. There was a small jewelry box with intricate inlay work, a set of wooden coasters, and what looked like the beginnings of a model sailboat. "These are really good," he said, genuinely impressed. "You've got a natural talent." "That means a lot coming from you," Charlotte replied, and the sincerity in her voice made Yates look up to meet her eyes. In that moment, something shifted between them. The space that had seemed so vast, the difference in their lives, their means, their worlds suddenly felt less significant than the connection they shared. The moment was broken by Lily's voice calling up from downstairs, asking if Pickles could have one of the dog treats she'd spotted in the kitchen. Charlotte smiled. "We should get back down there before she convinces Pickles to help her raid the cookie jar instead." Over lunch, which Charlotte had ordered from a local deli, they discussed ideas for the coffee table. Yates opened his portfolio, showing Charlotte photographs of pieces he'd made over the years. "These are extraordinary," she said, lingering over a photo of a dining table with a live edge. "Truly, Yates, you should be selling these in galleries, not just taking commissions when they come." Yates felt a flush of pleasure at her praise. "Maybe someday. For now, I'm happy with the balance. It lets me be there for Lily." "Speaking of which," Charlotte said, glancing at Lily, who was happily playing with Pickles in the adjoining room, "I have a proposal for you." Yates raised an eyebrow questioningly. "I have a friend who's opening a home goods boutique next month, very high-end, focused on artisanal pieces." Charlotte leaned forward slightly. "I showed her your portfolio, hope you don't mind, and she's interested in featuring your work." Yates stared at her, stunned. "You're serious?" "Completely. She thinks your pieces would be perfect for her clientele. The commission would be better than what you're getting now, and it could lead to more steady work." "I don't know what to say," Yates managed, his mind racing with possibilities. More stable income from his furniture would mean less time at the construction job, more time with Lily, maybe even the ability to save for her college fund, something that had seemed like an impossible dream until now. "Say you'll think about it," Charlotte suggested. "No pressure." "But I believe in your talent, Yates. You deserve to have others appreciate it too." Later, as they prepared to leave, Charlotte pulled Yates aside while Lily said a dramatic goodbye to Pickles. "There's something else I should tell you," she said, her voice lowered. "About my job." Yates waited, curious about the slight tension in her shoulders. "I'm not just a business consultant," Charlotte confessed. I'm the CEO of Leighton Enterprises. My grandfather founded the company, and I took over after my father retired. Yates felt like the floor had tilted beneath him. Leighton Enterprises was a major player in real estate development and venture capital, a corporation worth billions. You're Charlotte Leighton, he said slowly, realization dawning. As in the Leighton Foundation. She nodded, looking almost apologetic. I didn't mention it because, well, it changes how people interact with me, and I was enjoying just being Charlotte with you and Lily. Yates struggled to process this information. The woman he'd been growing increasingly fond of, the woman who sat on his second-hand couch and played board games with his daughter and admired his handmade furniture, was one of the wealthiest people in the city. Why did you let me pay for anything? He asked, the first question that popped into his mind. The ice cream, that time we went to the diner. Charlotte's expression softened. Because your pride matters to me and I respect you too much to make you feel like a charity case. She reached for his hand. That's not what this is, Yates. That's never what this has been. Before he could respond, Lily bounded over, ready to go. The moment for further conversation passed, but Yates's mind was reeling as they said their goodbyes and headed home. That night, after Lily was asleep, Yates sat at his small kitchen table, nursing a beer and trying to make sense of the day's revelations. His phone buzzed with a text from Charlotte. I hope I didn't overwhelm you today. Your friendship means a lot to me. Whatever else happens or doesn't happen, I want you to know that. Friendship. The word didn't quite capture what Yates was feeling for Charlotte, but it was a start. And perhaps that was the most surprising revelation of all, that despite the chasm between their financial situations, what he valued most was her company, her kindness, and the way she saw him not as a struggling single dad, but as a talented craftsman and a man worth knowing. The next morning, he called her. I'd like to take that meeting with your friend, he said when she answered. About my furniture. That's wonderful, Charlotte replied, the smile evident in her voice. And Yates, thank you for not letting yesterday change things. Who says it didn't? He countered. I'm thinking bigger now. Turns out I know someone who believes in me more than I believe in myself. Charlotte laughed, the sound warming him through the phone. In that case, I have another proposition for you. I'm listening. There's a charity gala next weekend for the Leighton Foundation. Very formal, very boring probably, but it would be significantly less boring if you came with me. Yates hesitated. I don't own a tuxedo, Charlotte. Details, she dismissed lightly. Say yes. Yes, he found himself saying, surprising himself with how much he meant it. The week that followed was a whirlwind. Charlotte's friend, Elena, met with Yates and immediately commissioned 3 pieces for her boutique's opening, offering an advance that was more than he typically made in 2 months at his construction job. Meanwhile, a tailor appeared at Yates's apartment to fit him for a tuxedo that arrived 2 days later, despite his protests that he could rent one. By the night of the gala, Yates had resigned himself to entering Charlotte's world, at least for one evening. Mrs. Patel had enthusiastically agreed to watch Lily, who was thrilled at the idea of her dad going to a real princess party. When Yates arrived at Charlotte's brownstone, dressed in the perfectly fitted tuxedo, she opened the door in a midnight blue gown that left him momentarily speechless. Her hair was swept up, revealing the elegant line of her neck, and she wore simple but obviously expensive jewelry. You look incredible, he managed finally. Charlotte's eyes traveled appreciatively over his tuxedo. So do you, very James Bond. In the car, a sleek town car with a driver, another detail Charlotte had arranged, Yates felt his nerves returning. I should warn you, I have no idea how to act at something like this. Charlotte reached for his hand, interlacing their fingers. Just be yourself. That's who I want by my side. The gala was held in the grand ballroom of one of the city's oldest hotels. As they entered, Yates was acutely aware of the curious glances directed their way. Charlotte Leighton was clearly a person of interest, and he was clearly an unknown entity. Charlotte. A silver-haired man approached them, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Lovely as always. And who is your guest?" "Gerard, this is Yates Zimmerman," Charlotte said smoothly. "Yates, Gerard Thornton, one of our board members." Yates shook the man's hand firmly. "Nice to meet you." "Zimmerman," Gerard repeated, as if testing the name. "I don't believe I know the family." "You wouldn't," Charlotte interjected before Yates could respond. "Yates is a master carpenter and furniture designer. His work is being featured in Alina Diaz's new boutique." Gerard's eyebrows rose slightly. "How interesting." His tone suggested the opposite. "Well, enjoy the evening." As he walked away, Charlotte squeezed Yates's arm. "Sorry about that. Not everyone here is so." "Rich and snobbish," Yates supplied with a small smile. Charlotte laughed. "I was going to say traditional, but your description is more accurate for some of them." Throughout the evening, Yates met dozens of people, some genuinely warm, others coolly assessing. Charlotte never left his side, her hand often finding his, her presence a steady anchor in this unfamiliar sea. During a quiet moment, as they sipped champagne near one of the massive windows overlooking the city, Charlotte turned to him with a serious expression. "Thank you for coming tonight," she said. "I know this isn't your usual scene." "Not exactly," Yates agreed, "but I'm glad I came." He paused, then added, "Though I still don't quite understand why you wanted me here." Charlotte studied him for a moment. "Do you really not know?" The softness in her voice made his heart beat faster. "I think I'm afraid to assume." "Then let me be clear," Charlotte said, stepping closer. "I didn't invite you because I needed a date. I invited you because over these past weeks, I've fallen in love with you, Yates Zimmerman. With your integrity, your talent, your devotion to Lily. With the man who would jump into traffic to save a stranger's dog without a second thought for himself." Yates felt the world narrow to just this moment, just her face before him. "Charlotte, there's a huge gap between our lives. I can't offer you. I don't care about any of that," she interrupted gently. "I have enough money for several lifetimes. What I don't have, what I've never had, until I met you and Lily, is someone who sees me for me, not for my bank account or my family name." Yates reached up to brush a stray tendril of hair from her face, his hand lingering against her cheek. "I've been falling in love with you too," he admitted. "But I'm afraid of what it would mean for Lily if this doesn't work out." Charlotte covered his hand with her own. "That's one of the reasons I love you, because you always think of her first. But Yates, I'm not going anywhere. I want to be in both your lives for as long as you'll have me." In answer, he leaned forward and kissed her, gently at first, then with growing certainty as she responded, her arms sliding around his neck. The world around them, the glittering ballroom, the string quartet, the murmur of wealthy voices faded away, leaving only this connection that had begun with a terrified dog and a split-second decision. When they finally broke apart, Charlotte's eyes were shining. "Let's get out of here," she whispered. "I've made my mandatory appearance." "Where to?" Yates asked, still holding her close. "Home," Charlotte said simply. "To check on Pickles, and then maybe you could tell me more about what you envision for my coffee table." Yates laughed, the sound full of joy and possibility. "That sounds perfect." 6 months later, Yates stood in his workshop, a converted garage behind the house he now shared with Charlotte, Lily, and Pickles. His furniture business had taken off after Alina's boutique opening, with commissions coming in steadily enough that he'd been able to quit his construction job and focus on his craft full-time. The transition hadn't been without challenges. Moving in with Charlotte had been a big step, one they'd approached carefully for Lily's sake. But his daughter had adjusted beautifully, thriving with the stability of 2 adults who adored her and the security of knowing they weren't struggling financially anymore. Yates had insisted on contributing to household expenses, using the income from his furniture business. Charlotte had understood his need for independence and agreed, though she'd pointed out that his greatest contribution was making the house feel like a home for all of them. And it did feel like home now. Charlotte's brownstone had transformed with Lily's artwork on the refrigerator, Yates's furniture integrated with Charlotte's existing pieces, and family photos new and old displayed throughout. As Yates put the finishing touches on his latest project, a custom rocking chair, he heard footsteps approaching. Charlotte appeared in the doorway, her expression a mix of nervousness and excitement. "Hey," he greeted her, setting down his sandpaper. "Everything okay?" Charlotte nodded, stepping into the workshop. "More than okay, I think. I have some news." Yates raised an eyebrow questioningly. "I went to the doctor yesterday," she said, moving closer to him. "Remember how I've been feeling tired lately? Turns out there's a reason for that." She took a deep breath. "I'm pregnant, Yates." The words hung in the air for a moment before their meaning registered fully. Yates stood frozen, sandpaper forgotten in his hand, as a wave of emotions crashed over him: shock, joy, fear, wonder. We're having a baby," he finally managed. Charlotte nodded, her eyes searching his face for his reaction. "Are you happy about this?" "I know we hadn't planned." He crossed the distance between them in 2 strides, gathering her into his arms and lifting her off her feet in an exuberant embrace. "Happy doesn't begin to cover it," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Charlotte, this is incredible." When he set her down, she was smiling through tears. "I was hoping you'd feel that way." "I know it's fast, and we haven't even talked about marriage. Marry me," Yates said abruptly, surprising himself with the words but knowing immediately they were right. "Not because of the baby, but because I love you and I want to build a life with you." "I was planning to ask anyway. I've had the ring for weeks." "You have?" Charlotte asked, her eyes widening. Yates nodded, taking her hand and leading her to his workbench. He opened a small drawer and pulled out a velvet box. "I was making a jewelry box to put it in," he explained, opening the box to reveal a simple but elegant ring with a single diamond. "It's not as fancy as what you're probably used to." "It's perfect," Charlotte interrupted, her voice hushed with emotion. "And yes, Yates Zimmerman, I will marry you." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Yates marveled at how his life had changed in less than a year. From a struggling single dad to a man with a thriving business, a partner who loved him for who he was, and now, a growing family. All because he jumped into traffic to save a little dog named Pickles. "Should we tell Lily?" Charlotte asked, admiring the ring on her finger. "Absolutely," Yates agreed. "She's going to be thrilled about being a big sister." Hand in hand, they walked from the workshop toward the house, where Lily was helping Pickles practice his tricks in the backyard. As they approached, Lily looked up, her face breaking into a smile at the sight of them together. "Dad, Charlotte, look what Pickles can do now," she called, holding up a treat as the little dog sat on his hind legs, front paws raised in a begging position. "That's amazing, Lilybug," Yates said, his heart full to bursting with love for his family, the one he'd had and the one that was growing in ways he'd never imagined possible. Charlotte squeezed his hand, and he knew she felt it to the perfect rightness of where they'd ended up, against all odds. Not because of her wealth or his talent, but because of a split-second decision made from the heart and the courage to let love in when it appeared in the most unexpected way.